Hello, everyone. Welcome to this panel session about accelerating digital innovation in pharma. My name is André Heeg. I'm a managing director and partner with BCG Digital Ventures, so the building arm of BCG, so to say. As a quick intro on myself, I have a medical background. Started my career as a maxilla facial surgeon before I went into consulting and then the entrepreneurial life. Also worked as CDO for Sandoz, Novartis, and currently heading the European business for BCG Digital Ventures. I'm super happy to welcome four co-panelists on this panel with me. And I would ask everyone to introduce themselves briefly, starting with what is to the right on my screen, Anne. So Anne, maybe you start with a brief intro.
Thank you so much, André, and thanks so much for having us today. My name is Anne Witt. I'm Global Head Digital Business Development at Novartis. So we are building the bridges between our internal and external innovation from a pharma perspective, and I'm overseeing the team who's looking after our strategic partnerships in data and digital, so driving our digital transformation journey from research all the way to commercial. My background is in science and business. I started my career actually on the lab bench in X-ray crystallography, so protein biochemistry work, before moving into consulting and then into the pharma industry side of things, and have been now with Novartis for 7 years and calling in today from Switzerland.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Anne. I would hand over to Tanja for a brief intro.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Tanja Dowe. I'm the CEO of Debiopharm Innovation Fund, investing in digital health, for example, in the area of how to make pharma R&D more efficient. I'm also chairing here at Debiopharm our digital transformation committee, and we're working on the digital transformation strategy. So I'm kind of both looking at things from investment perspective, but also from the perspective of transforming pharma and using more digital tools. My background is entrepreneurial and in strategy and transaction consulting before I joined the investment side of things.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Next up, Yaron.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. So my name is Yaron. I'm a partner at aMoon Ventures. aMoon is a $1.3 billion life science and health tech dedicated venture fund. We are headquartered in Israel, but are a global fund with offices also in Boston. And we invest globally in both early, mid, and late stage life science and health tech companies. My background is in science as well. So I'm a PhD biochemist by training, and then spent about 14 years in industry, primarily as CEO of early stage companies, private as well as public. I then spent about 3 years in technology transfer, running the technology transfer arm of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, one of the oldest and more prolific technology transfer operations in the world. And I've joined aMoon about 2.5 years ago, where I lead early stage investments.
Thank you very much. And last but certainly not least, I would ask David for a quick intro. I think you have.
Yep. Yeah, 2 years into COVID, we still struggle with mute and unmute, right? So thank you for having me, and it's really a pleasure to join all of you today. So my name is David Braun. I'm working with Merck as part of the digital health team, and I'm focusing. It's been 7 years. I'm into that space now, and I've been focusing a lot on strategies and enabling our drug businesses to define their own digital health strategy. And given what I've observed in the last few years, I'm tending now to focus more on the commercial side of it. So there's a tendency to define nice strategies, nice products. Question is, how do you take them to market? How do you make money out of it? How do you enable the drug business out of it? And looking more at the patient care and care delivery of digital health. So digital health is a very broad topic, right? And with many different areas. By background, I'm an engineer, applied physics engineer. I've been working in different industries consumer electronics, consumer goods, aerospace, startups, and big corporations. And I bring all those different aspects into the world of digital health today.
Thank you very much, everyone. And again, thank you for being part of that panel. So to kick it off, I want to get the most obvious question out of the way right away. What effect has the pandemic made on digital innovation on pharma? So what have you seen the pandemic over the last 2 years has made? Tanja, maybe from the investor point of view, have you seen any difference from before and like after, meaning during the last 2 years?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there sort of people have started to believe more in digital alternatives to do things differently. Before the pandemic, there was a bit of a bigger change resistance and explanation of why, there was always an explanation why we can't use it, or a regulatory, or whatever reason. But I think that we kind of COVID stopped us from having excuses. There are ways to do things faster and more efficiently, and we really saw that. And there's more interest also from what I see from internally at Debiopharm, but also in our portfolio companies. The amount of incoming requests to get to know the technologies or to ask for projects is, I've never seen that before. So it's really changed attitudes in the user group.
Yaron, for aMoon, is that a similar experience? Can you confirm what Tanja just said, or do you have a different perspective as well?
Yeah, I think we see very similar trends to what Tanja is describing. A lot of more receptivity and flexibility around handling data, such as, for example, real-world evidence data, remotely captured data, things that are sort of changing the paradigm for example, running clinical trials, and how robust clinical trials could be when you run them using digital and sometimes remote mechanisms versus the physician hands-on. The other element outside of sort of that flexibility is also the importance of sort of integrated systems and the medical record, the ability of the data to sort of affect each other. What I think even broadly than pharma, the world has become sort of a biotech investor, right? Everyone, whereas like 3 years ago, no one knew what a development plan was for a vaccine. Every single person in the street today knows phase 1, phase 2, phase 3s, primary endpoints, this, emergency approvals, FDA. It's like everyone's a biotech investor already, and everyone has opinions about, comparative efficacy and safeties and, children versus adults. I think that discussion, on one hand, creates a lot of noise and a lot of confusion. And unfortunately, for those that are somewhat new to the industry, may be a little bit misleading about how easy or rapid some processes can actually be. But there is a very big plus to it as well, which is people are finally sort of embracing and understanding that health tech and healthcare is a global challenge, and the folks that are sort of standing at the forefront of solving those challenges need support and need funding and need our sort of belief that they are going to be solving solutions flexibly and innovatively. So it's been a very, very interesting period to be an investor in digital health.
Yeah, absolutely. I can fully agree, right? And what you said resonates a lot. It shone a light on like how drugs are developed, how the development process works, what are the ups and downs, and so on. And like you said, everyone has an opinion. And then David. So coming from the industry perspective, being part of a large organization, and for you running BD&L at Novartis, digital BD&L, what has changed in terms of solutions you're looking at? Is the company more receptive to digital solution, or has the focus shifted? So what have you seen over the last 2 years?
I think definitely the word acceleration summarizes the last 2 to 3 years very much so. We pretty much shifted from a face-to-face interacting BD organization to an organization with back-to-back Microsoft Teams meetings and accelerating all of those partnership discussions that everybody was thinking would never be possible in the world before without face-to-face with conferences like JP Morgan at the start of the year to get through. So we're looking after really record level years of deal activities and a surge of activities to rethink the traditional way of doing business. And I must say it's even more pronounced on the commercial setting, because here you had very much seen through COVID the limitations of our traditional way of going to the doctors, reaching the patients, because everybody was stuck at home. So what were the new channels to exploit and to reach our core customers here? So definitely acceleration, but coming also to a point that I'm personally very excited about is the amount of data that we have collected in the past years. And that goes to Yaron's point around real-world evidence. It's much more an integrated approach to think through what are the distinct data packages and how can we, through the metaverse of the different data, be it from patient-reported outcomes to real-world evidence to data being generated from EHRs, to stitch those together and create, and that's the most important part, insights and also feedback loops directly back into the system. So my hope is that coming out of COVID, we really have now sort of an inflection point where we can also embark on much more ecosystem partnerships to exploit the richness of the data, the insights, and the recommendations from the data. So power of the data, I would say, is the number one outcome of the COVID pandemic.
Very good, David. From a Merck perspective, what can you add?
I mean, first of all, I completely agree with everything that was already said, and it's how to add something. I think that from a corporate point of view, I think one thing that we cannot underestimate is the change of mindset within the company. You know, when you need to talk about digital health solutions with people that deal with real, pharma R&D, sometimes it has been pretty challenging because we are talking different languages. And here again, I think that COVID, one, but also, I mean, the fact that everyone had kind of a personal experience in that COVID. They all knew someone that was impacted in a way or another. If it's, students that had challenges with mental health, if it's elderly people that were completely left alone during the period because they couldn't see siblings, if it's, getting appointments and, with doctors, etc. So everyone that maybe 2 years ago had in mind, I still don't see the value of digital, right? Or saw digital as a threat on their job and the role they were playing, suddenly sees it as an opportunity. And the dialogue becomes way more easier. The collaboration of the co-creation we have within the company on identifying, how do we create value out of digital health suddenly became, I think, easier and more comprehensive. I think that in parallel to COVID, maybe not only, it's not only COVID, but I think it's also the maturity that we are reaching, after many years where we're trying and testing. I think the maturity of digital health today gets to a point where we can really start talking about, okay, how do we make it successful, but concretely with real KPIs, with real performances. I think that combination of the maturity and COVID, I think, has brought a few years ahead, probably in a short amount of time.
Absolutely, yeah. So probably at the beginning of the pandemic, just to summarize, right? Like, the accelerated development was a lot around like telemedicine, right? How can you connect virtually to a doctor or a healthcare professional in that sense? Now, 2 years down the road, I mean, another extreme, and Anne mentioned the word already, the metaverse, right? Like how can healthcare move to the metaverse, right? The next question I would like to explore a little bit with you is like, what is the most interesting trend or trends that you see in 2022 and maybe beyond? Like what is on your radar screen right now that you are exploring? Maybe David, we start with you and then move forward.
One topic is definitely, and I think it was mentioned earlier by some of my peers here, is the ecosystem or the platform, and how do you integrate data from multiple points, if it's diagnostic, if it's patients, if it's EHRs, or if it's clinical trials, into a way that allows you to analyze the data and to generate business or whatever insights you want. So I think there is an understanding that a lot of different solutions in parallel will be difficult in terms of adoption, right? I mean, a patient that is on multi drugs will not deal with different apps. I mean, when you go to the doctor and every patient has a different app that he's using, it's not going to push adoption. So we need to think about platforms. We need to think about standardized ways to get data from devices, from solutions in general, to really create that impact and build on this data that sometimes exists, but we don't really know how to use it in an efficient way. So I think this is one trend that we absolutely see. The second one, which I think is an interesting one, is how to use digital health to drive sustainability. And that's something that I'm involved in as part of the one of the work streams that comes out of the COP26 initiative, is thinking about the usage of digital health to reduce the carbon footprint of the healthcare industry, which is pretty significant. Telemedicine is the obvious one, right? Because you avoid patients to travel from home to clinic or from home to a practitioner. But how do you drive your clinical trials in a digital way? How do you deliver care in a digital manner? And everything around that, how do you make your clinical trials more efficient, reduce waste, and so on and so forth, so that you also have an impact on manufacturing. So all this digital world is kind of enabler of that. I think we are at the beginning, but it's interesting to see that more and more pharma companies are using sustainability as a value driver for digital health. Again, I think that's something that a year ago, 2 years ago, were not existing. Today, it becomes, common topic when you talk to the other big pharma companies.
Very good, thank you. Tanja, you as an investor and also like part of a pharma company, you obviously have your finger at the pulse. Like what is on your list for 2022?
So I'm going to bring something different. I see consumerism coming through in every way into what we're doing. And we've talked about patient centricity. We've talked about health consumers, but really the type of consumerism from other fields entering the usability, the user interfaces, the easiness, the intuitiveness of our systems that we're using. These are coming through. Another thing is that, still maybe 2 years ago, everyone was saying, well, we can't use wearables, the standard wearables. You have to be FDA regulated and so on. And we're starting to see that, all these regular wearables are actually, they're advancing so fast and the sensitivity is improving all the time. So, actually the ones that you try to get FDA approved and kind of freeze the development, then, they don't advance. So we need to, I think that the consumerism is really pushing us to also try to figure out ways to validate and regulate things that we want to use, whether they're using AI and the product is not frozen, it doesn't stay in that one stable format, but improves over time. How are we going to be able to use that in healthcare? So really, I think that that's coming stronger than I've seen before into healthcare.
Great. And from your perspective, obviously coming from a very like science-heavy pharma player, right? Like wearables may be of relevance for you as well, but anything else for this year and beyond?
Of course, AI and AI-enabled drug design. I mean, we've talked about drug discovery before. It's no longer discovered; it's design. So whatever we can do to design those molecules, from finding new targets and optimizing up to retrosynthesis, AI-enabled translational medicine. The way we invest is we look at the pharmaceutical value chain, the pharma development value chain, and what we try to do is every piece by piece, we try to find alternatives to really disrupt each stage, whether it's translational medicine, phase 1, phase 2, or so on. So those AI-driven methods are really coming stronger and stronger, and I'm really glad about that, because I believe that's the way that we can really become more efficient, shorten the timelines, and be able to deliver more personalized drugs also for more rare diseases.
Yeah. And I know AI and data is a big focus of Novartis. So what is on your list for this year and beyond?
Yeah, it's hard to add on because all the trends were already summarized, but perhaps to offer sort of the next layer of perspective, I think building on AI in drug development, certainly we have seen very promising point solutions. I think it's, like Tanja said, it's taking one step and peeling the onion one step after the next. But it's really also to scale this then and embed data and AI into end-to-end work streams, where I think the power to shorten timelines, to ramp up cycle times, to increase probability of success, and the proof of the pudding to really pull it through from end to end will hopefully come this year or the early next year. So that is certainly keeps us up at night. The other element around the commercial market access partnerships. So when I'm listening to David around the patient engagement end-to-end platforms, the way how we bring drugs to market moving forward, it will have an interesting component around ecosystem partnerships, and see much more around how can providers, payers, tech partners, pharma companies all come together in the ecosystem and create value, system value around the patient. That is, of course, the hope. Still, some work to be done to bring this to reality, but something we're actively working on.
Thank you, Yaron. Unless you have anything to add, we can also take on a different question that is somewhat related. Yeah. So, what do you think is the biggest challenge right now for innovation in pharma? Right. We talked about the accelerated acceptance of digital health over the last 2 years. We talked about trends and hopes that everyone has, but there are obviously challenges, because otherwise it would be too easy almost, right? So what do you see preventing big advancements, or what are challenges?
Yeah, I sort of feel silly answering this with two colleagues from the pharma world, or three, watching over my backs. Like, what do you know about challenges in pharma? I'll actually try, André, and tie this with some sort of perspective from the previous question. I think they do go well together. I think the biggest challenge is to really have an understanding of what digitalization and digital health actually is good for, because I think what we see as an investor, and we see close to 2,000 investment opportunities a year, is a lot of people would come with some digital something, and that in and of itself it's not valuable, right? So digitalization is enablement, right? It is something that we are infusing into how we do things, or how we change how we do things to achieve a certain goal. And I think that the biggest challenge is to make sure that we are harnessing the digitalization and the technologies to achieve very particular goals and set those goals and achieve them. So whether it's harmonization and collaboration, like Anne and David mentioned, or whether it's better prediction design and throughput of drugs. I think the way I look at sort of the core values or goals of digitalization is in what we call the 4 A's. Affordability. So digitalization should drive affordability of care. Accessibility. Digitalization's primary goal is to just make healthcare more accessible to patients. We talk about accuracy. So digitalization tools should be able to heighten the accuracy of certain predictions, certain processes, certain interventions, more precise, more customized, more personalized, more, in the right time for the right person. And finally, and that's a pretty bad A, what we like to say ahead, meaning what we want to do is we want to move healthcare from a place where we intervene when something's bad to a place where we intervene where something is still pretty good, not that bad yet. So we want to move the entire, intervention landscape ahead of disease. We want to get ahead of disease. And digitalization can help us in many ways to capture things when they're still small, where the response rates to drugs is phenomenal, when the cure rate is great, when the ability to turn an acute condition into a chronic manageable condition is great. If we can grab these diseases when they're still young and small, we can get ahead of disease. So I think if you remain sort of focused on looking at digital tools, not just, oh, how cool, this is now, digitalized, but looking at how they enable these 4 A's, that is the focus of what we're doing in 22 and the next few years.
I like that framework a lot. Yeah, I might have to steal it with pride. Yeah, and use it.
It's free. Don't have to steal it. You can use it.
So from the real pharma representatives, so to say, yeah, who wants to add to the challenges? Like, what do you see in the industry, or maybe within your own corporation? Like, where are still hurdles to overcome?
So we'll definitely steal the 4A pride framework with pride. So thank you, Yaron, for this contribution. But I think coming back to the enablement, digital transformation brings with itself a new beast of business model, and a new beast of business model that has different risk profiles, different timelines. And when you compare it to a portfolio approach, when a traditional pharma company must do an investment in either advancing the traditional way of accelerating assets through the traditional way of pipeline approaches, or going the digital route, there is a different bridge to be done here on a business side, and brings with it a risk profile also of an unknown component around the data, and how much of the data will stay within the company walls, or need to go outside into the unknowns of algorithms and data models, etc. So in a nutshell, it creates this level of uncertainty that is still, even though COVID has brought with itself lowering hurdles throughout, still a hurdle to jump into it, and really articulating the value contribution of this enabling platform. And that creates, not to say friction, but creates certainly not the easiest road to bridge, to say absolutely this is the anchor pillar to build everything on top.
Thank you. David, Tanja, anything to add from your perspective?
Maybe one aspect, I think, and again, I can only agree with what Yaron and what Anne has already said. So just to add, I think one of the challenges that we also see is the scalability. How do you scale up? How do you, it's a mix of the enablement and the scalability. How do you usually, it's not a molecule that you launch, that the molecule has got the FDA stamp, you go to the doctor, get a prescription, and go to the pharmacy and get your drug, right? Digital health is still something that is considered as an innovation. Very often we try to measure success. As we pilot, we identify what success looks like, and then based on that, we decide, do we scale? And if we scale, how do we scale? And then you come also to the commercialization aspects and the enablement, and is the sales rep that has been used to sell a syringe or a pill for the last 20 years able now to deal with digital health and have a dialogue with the physician or with the clinic about digital health? It's different type of skills that those people need to have. So So starting with piloting is often quite easy. How do you scale up and really get your return on investment? And return on investment is not necessarily money. I mean, there are a lot of other ways to measure this return on investment. I think is one of the challenges, the main challenges we're going through at this moment.
Very good. Thank you. Tanja, anything to add, or?
All has
all
been
covered.
All covered. I couldn't agree more. You know, the kind of the moving from this early pilot and excitement into how do we really use these on an ongoing basis, and that's the big hurdle that I see as well.
Okay, so let's stay with you for now. So something I'm always very curious about, and maybe the viewers of this panel are as well, is how did you get into digital innovation in the first place, right? So right now, after the last 2 years, people may think, oh yeah, it's kind of obvious, right? But all of you started way earlier, right? And I know when I looked at your CVs, right, like 3 of you, I think, are scientists by background. David is an engineer, right? So it's not super obvious that there is, like, from the very beginning in your career, there's like, I want to be a digital innovator, right? So how did you get in there? Like, what was your motivation? Why do you stay in it, right? And do you see potential for others who want to move in that area as well?
I want to start. Okay, perfect.
We start with you. Yeah.
Sure. So I saw the beginning of this whole digital health trend when Microsoft bought Nokia. Nokia had done a lot of work in kind of future research, and they had in the background for many years digital health as one of the topics that they were developing. And when that acquisition happened, a lot of engineers fled from Nokia, and they started coming up with these wonderful ideas for digital health, for healthcare. And I was strategy and transaction consultant, and I started talking with some of these companies, and they said, you know, we would sit in a meeting in August, and they would go, I'm going to bring this to Christmas market. And I asked them, which Christmas? But they thought that they're going to bring, and they had these ideas that we'll have cell phone reading certain medical records, as it, so, you know, in ambulances and, you know, ER. And they thought that, you know, people could just use their personal cell phones because everyone's so there was just this really radical thinking that, of course, I've been in healthcare, so, oh, you don't know how to get into our business at all, and, you know, there's regulation and there's reimbursement but then I tried to help with, you know, work with some of these companies and started seeing that, you know, what they do, they don't come and understand, okay, this is my regulatory path and start planning it. They actually went around it. They said, okay, well, if I can't get immediately to patient care through other means, I'm going to talk to the clinics and I'm going to tell them you're going to save money with my app. And they just went around, and they were so innovative and finding new ways. And I got really excited about digital health back then. And, you know, I kind of why I'm still in it and why do I still continue? It's, you know, we have these big problems of aging population and the healthcare costs. I really want to be part of solving these issues, and, you know, I know we can do better with digital. So why don't we do it? And maybe a more personal experience. My father participated in a digital health clinical trial recently by Roche. It was following cardiovascular patients. And he got a wearable and a couple of connected devices and an ePro. And my father, being 85 years old, was able to use all of those devices perfectly. And what he told me is that, you know, and he's a former cardiac surgeon. He said, you know, I feel so much better because when the nurse calls me, she knows what's going on and she sees my steps and she sees my, and just having that personal experience of, you know, a loved one's, really seeing how much it means to them and how much better and more patient-centric that care is. I'm in it for life. Yeah. You know, digital health, here I am.
Great. I love the energy. Yaron, what made it for you? Like, how did you get into digital health? And you have to unmute yourself. Sorry. happens to the best.
Hey, David, the only thing that's worse than being the first one that does that, it's like being the second one on the call that does that. So you know, like you said, I'm a scientist by training. The only digital thing I had when I started my PhD was that Nokia phone that Tanja was doing, and it had like 4 games on it. To me, digital health actually comes from a slightly different angle. I mean, I agree with everything that Tanja was saying, but to me, it really comes from the roots of Israel and the Israeli innovation ecosystem. So, you know, Israel has been known for many, many years to be a very innovative country with a lot of sort of startup mentality and a lot of disruptive ways of doing things. And in fact, what we've been known and have been sort of successful time after time is getting involved in industries that are well established, that are pretty, you know, traditional, and then infusing them with tech. You know, if you think about, for example, the automobile industry, you know, Israel actually made a car like a few decades ago, even before I was born. It was a really horrible car. But then think, you know, fast forward 20, 30 years into the future, we now have Mobileye owned by Intel, and this is, you know, infusing digital technology into the automobile industry. We did similar things in agriculture and food. We did similar things in insurance. And I think, you know, the time for the digital transformation of healthcare is something that is right for Israel and for Israeli innovation, and something that we at aMoon, when aMoon was founded 5 years ago, marked as something we would want to be a part of. We would want to be able to facilitate the same sort of level of innovation and digital transformation that the country has been sort of involved with in other industries, also to the healthcare industry. It sits on top of, again, very innovative, very entrepreneurial people, but also a very well integrated healthcare system that a lot of people are familiar with, and an extremely digital system with longitudinal records. So it's a very prime location to look for sort of digital disruption. That's where we at aMoon and I personally come into the picture, and I think we can, you know, in the last few years that I've been involved with young entrepreneurs, this has been the glitter in their eyes to be able to figure out, to hack, you know, some long-standing traditional processes and issues with a completely novel digital perspective.
Yeah, very cool. Anne, how was it for you?
Well, first of all, thank you both, Tanja and Yaron, for sharing those personal stories. It really shows the glitter in your eyes, and to witness that is really powerful and exciting. For me, it really started in the lab and on the lab bench. So I'm biochemistry by training. I did a lot of work with protein structures, and really tested also the limits of protein complexes when they weren't able to purify in the complexes that I wanted to, and then to the level that one could run X-ray crystallography studies. So really witnessing here the power of data and computational models to predict protein structures, to simulate them in silico, and to advance research in this field really was for me the first step. And then when it presented itself that Novartis embarked on this big transformational story in data and digital to drive it throughout the organization, was really a wonderful opportunity to join the digital BD team at that time and really spread the wings, because the power of digital for me, I see it in research clearly, but it's really going across the different platforms and being a stitching pattern of commercial all the way to research.
Very good. David, how, like, you're the only engineer here by training, yeah, so you are the closest, I would say, to digital innovation in a sense, at least, right? So but what brought you to digital health?
So you know, as an engineer, I've been working in the high-tech industry in different places in the world, and the last job before moving into Merck, into Pharma, was into a consumer goods company. I've been in consumer goods, and I think that there is probably no system in the world that is as complex as the pharma world, or as the healthcare world, I would say. or a company that doesn't really think about the end user, the end customer, as a consumer, right? And that's what I think there's a massive opportunity to bring a lot from the consumer industry, from the consumer. Tanja was talking about consumerization. I think this is spot on, right? You know, how do you transform an industry that is used to give a pill that is kind of a given, you know, doctor will prescribe it and then you go to the pharmacy and you get it, into something where you want to differentiate, you want to engage the patient, you want to provide an experience to the patient that simplifies his life. On top of the other stakeholders that you have in the game as the HCPs, the payers, and so on and so forth. But there are so many examples where we could see the transformation of the life of a patient just because he gets something around the drug. You know, and patients, I think today are expecting more from the pharma industries than just pill, right? They really expect an experience, especially when you talk about chronic diseases, something that will make their life easier and simpler as it can be when you have a chronic disease. And I think that that's what I really bring into my role today is this experience from the other industries I was in prior to that, and how do we bring that and transform and shape. I think there's a big opportunity to shape that. I think we are just at the early beginning. Yes, we see it's progressing. It's better today than 5 years ago, but I think there is still a lot to do, and it's on us to shape it and make it happen.
Perfect. So maybe we have time for one more question, and you gave a good keyword to it. There's still a lot left to do, right? Now I would like to take a look together with you 5 years and beyond, maybe even 10 years or so in the future. Over the last 3 years, we all have learned about a mRNA platform, right? Like cell and gene is another one that is very big at Novartis, for example. So there are these big innovation promises, right, that are happening in pharma, right? Like if you take more the tech angle, there are things on the horizon like quantum computing, right, that will bring much more analytical power to things, and AI obviously being a huge topic, right? So if you can take a crystal ball and look 5 to 10 years out, what do you believe are the big innovation that is on the horizon and that maybe we still see in our lifetimes, right, being reality? So maybe start with Yaron this time. So what would your crystal ball tell you?
Wow, I get to go first on the hardest question. Okay, so maybe I'll mention a couple. I think the field of synthetic biology and our ability to finally understand enough about the makeup of biology. So what is biology made of? What are organisms made of at a finer resolution? So now we can turn it around and start generating and engineering biological entities that do the work we want them to do instead of the work they decide to do. So there's a lot of sort of trial and error still. There's a lot of let's drop this microbe, or let's drop this peptide, or let's drop this mRNA and see what they do, predict maybe they'll do this and then find out. I think we're at a point where instead of knowing very little about things and just going by trial and error, I think Tanja started the discussion by mentioning that we're finally at a stage where I think we're starting to understand enough about why are things behaving the way they're behaving that we can actually turn it around and make them beneficial for us. And so the field of synthetic biology, the way we describe it, is either taking biological systems or components and making machines out of them, or taking machines and making them do biological effects, biological outcomes. It's something that we are very bullish about. And I think over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see, microbes and active molecules like oligos and small robots like nanobots implants and wearables that are starting to not just sense things, not just sort of collect data, but also increasingly intervening and becoming true therapeutics. Maybe I'll stop here because I think I don't want to take the good ideas from others, but this is one field that I'm super excited about.
Okay, thank you. That's truly exciting. I agree. Anne, like what do you see?
Perhaps to take the other spectrum of the value chain around how we bring care to patients, I think we'll see an overrun to providing it in a much more efficient and taking out intermediaries, the inefficiency of healthcare, how it is currently developed and delivered. So I think that will create one sort of those super highways approaches that we all aspire to, so that it's much faster to get to the right treatment, to have a much more personalized approach to receiving care, and the end-to-end experiments, also taking the lessons from consumerism into that and folding this into. There are certainly platform technologies like blockchain that we can leverage for that, and I think we'll be infiltrating this field more and more. Time will tell if everyone is sort of owning the next supercomputers and leveraging quantum mechanics on it, but I would rather see it that it's the power of truly leveraging data and digital in end-to-end work streams that will be more the more tangible next overhauls that we would see in this industry.
Okay, very good. David, over to you. What do you see?
I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see everyone probably finding his space into the digital health puzzle, right? We have the big techs, the GAFAs, the startups, the pharma companies. And today, we all step on each other's toes a little bit. Everyone is kind of observing who's doing what and in which direction it's going. A lot of investments, some are successful, some less. So I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see that piece come together with everyone will have a role to play. I think it's important everyone understand what is the role it should focus on and what is the role where it should not go. And I think that will also help us, because once we'll have all this ecosystem in place, I mean, there's today millions of data points collected. We were talking about wearables every day. What do we do with this data? And I think it will really open up the possibilities in terms of prevention, right? I mean, with all the data that we collect from people that feel well, that are not yet sick, right? We'll be able to bring into the game the prevention, the warnings, and then help orient those people into either the standard healthcare system or into a more digital healthcare system, but to be able to treat them as early as possible and reduce the burden, reduce the cost, reduce the problems of patients in general.
Perfect, very good. Tanja, finally, your crystal ball.
Wow. I think that Anne and Yaron and David pretty much said it all, but I maybe a kind of a summarize. And I'm also looking at this very much from kind of patient perspective also, although I really agree with the synthetic biology as well. But I believe that in 5 to 10 years, all our healthcare is going to be in cloud. We all have access to our own health data, and we're increasing that health data through personal monitoring, through wearables, all of us. I think that this data, this continuous collection plays a huge part in all of our health, whether it's in wellness or sickness. We will be able to predict, prevent, measure our health, improve our health, and monitor our health much more ourselves. And I think that with that, we're also going to flip a little bit towards more consumer responsibility over our own health. So in that automation where all the capabilities move to us, we will also have more responsibilities. And what also this all kind of defines is that the care is moving much more to home. I think still that pharma companies will have an important role in this future health, because with better AI and improved methods, we're also maybe getting more to curative care, so to cure diseases and not just treat.
Thank you very much. So we took a little journey in the recent past. We spent a little time in like the current present and the trends, right? Like your personal motivation. And now we took a look into the future. That was our little journey that we had as a panel through accelerating digital innovation. So let me close with thanking this panel a lot. Yeah, that was really inspiring and energizing for me. So have a great day, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you very much.
Bye-bye.